Alright, so I thought that we'd take a quick look through the Canterbury Regional Council meeting. From the last meeting, the matter of dogs on buses, which I know that constituents do actually talk to me about, in which JJ Smith came along. Craig Pauling asked if in the minutes if we could get an update on where that's lodged within staff around the notion of allowing dogs on our buses. The resolution status report is a report that basically outlines decisions that the council have made and where they're at. And so there was a decision that the council have made from 2022, and I moved an amendment to the report status, the resolution within it, for the report within this resolution to be circulated amongst councillors. When I first raised the amendment, I had to go and wordsmith it with the governance team because they weren't happy with a certain technical word within it, but in the end we got there and this was the amendment that carried in the end. Basically, why did I do this? Well, there was an interagency working group set up between the City Council and the Regional Council, and it's looking at estuaries, catchments, urban waterways, particularly in the Christchurch territory, and considering the shared interests that we both have as local authorities and certain environmental assets, certain programs we fund, it's probably wise of us to come together and look where we can collaborate, particularly in parts of the city where we both have land. We confirm the minutes of a couple of committees, a couple of statutory committees that we're associated with. We might hold the pen for them, we might be the secretariat for them. An example of that is the Regional Transport Committee. And what is interesting about this is the minute noted on page 44 here. Secretarial note: it was discovered after the meeting that quorum for the meeting was lost during agenda item 8.3 during discussion on the motion. Therefore, the following agenda items and public excluded agenda items will go to the next meeting. Now, what is funny about this is that we can see at the remaining minutes here that, it says carried, quorum is not present. Moving now to major report item 1, and there was many of them within this agenda, and this is one of the reasons why I'm kind of happy to talk about it. We approved the annual report and the annual report summary for the year ended 30 June 23. The purposes of an annual report are to compare the actual activities and the actual performance of the local authority in the year with the intended activities and the intended level of performance is set out in respect of the year and in the long-term plan and the annual plan. So here it is. What to say about this? I'm not going to talk too much about this because obviously it's a big piece of work and staff put a lot of effort into it. But what I would note is interesting is that we spend 1.1 million of funding to biodiversity projects across the region. We're a $270 million expenditure organisation. That's about 0.3% of our expenditure. I mean, wouldn't it be great to pick that up to 2.5%? But again, I'm not going to hold really on this. At the actual meeting, some councillors put in some very pointed questions that elicited a relatively good response, serious response, because, if we're going to put levels of service in here and we're going to say that they're met, then, we want to see evidence that they've been met. And the councillors are completely within their rights as scrutineers on behalf of the public, of our public entities, of our public organisations, to do just that. And that did occur. So when government is looking at passing legislation, we will fulfil the role of a submission maker on our behalf. And in this circumstance, our hat is the authority. We are the administrating authority for the Regional Civil Defence Emergency Management Group and our statutory responsibilities as Regional Council. So the bill seeks to improve how the emergency management system manages risks, responds to and recovers from emergencies, and empowers and supports communities to be resilient. Very important piece of legislation. Paragraph 39 is that Environment Canterbury is concerned that the scope, extent and overlapping areas of responsibility of the new regulation powers creates the potential for ambiguity and confusion in the regulations and secondary legislation and calls for clarity in this area. And also that a transformational approach is required. So civil defence, emergency management, we've seen quite a significant period in which we have seen the centralisation of certain aspects of that management to national entities such as NEMA. And, we really need to consider localised response, national response, regional response. And if all of the cogs within those certain areas aren't necessarily turning together, then we can very quickly have quite a dysfunctional circumstance in which national state of emergencies are declared, directives are put in place, you're down at the ground, communities are there, and ultimately that's probably where I think that we're missing the biggest piece in the puzzle at the moment. Is my experience of my community is that they're not really connected into civil defence locally. They're not really connected into ideas. Of course, there's ideas that they get through certain mediums, for getting under the table in the state of an earthquake. Those messages might have landed, but I can say, speaking to community groups, that this whole notion at the moment is that communities set up their own plans because ultimately it's community leaders in organisations, volunteer organisations, churches, sports clubs, etc. If people run out of food, they're going to connect into those types of communities, etc. in an event. So this notion that they have to have plans, well, I don't think that is necessarily being communicated well enough. Do communities and individuals know that they should have a document as a PDF on their computer or as a file in their kitchen in which they can turn to in the event of crisis? Because suddenly you'll realise your vulnerabilities, and suddenly you'll realise how quickly things can change. And the reason I say this, and the reason that most of the people in Canterbury who've been here for a particular amount of time will understand what I'm saying, is because we went through it with the earthquakes. We saw our city, our lives unfold in front of us, and that could be another topic for another conversation. 8.6. Public transport strategic asset control. So this is the approval here of $500,000 funding over 2 years to conduct this investigation, develop a business case of the cost in the current financial year being met from public transport reserves. Again, on something as strategic and as fiscal as this, I have to be cautious around what I can say. I did vote for these motions because the previous legislation we had, the PTOL model, was draconian in its market-driven function, and the new sustainable public transport framework allows a lot more public involvement in use and service, and I'm a supporter of this. I think that we can probably spend money better in some circumstances than profit-oriented operators. 8.7 Vehicle Kilometres Travelled Initiative Funding Agreement. The only comment I'd make on this report is regarded to the interesting bracket lines on behalf of the Greater Christchurch Partnership that we see quite a few times throughout the report, and that effectively the funding agreement and the funding that passes through the regional council is basically nothing to do with the regional council. And what do I mean by that? Paragraph 13. Environment Canterbury has agreed to act as a banker for this work on behalf of the Greater Christchurch Partnership and to also undertake relevant procurement processes. We see a lot of this at the regional council level for a number of reasons, but where we delegate out certain functions like policy developments, etc., that we become almost a guardian organisation in terms of oversight, in terms of financing, but our actual involvement with development within it is moved into other places. And there's positives and negatives to that. I'm not talking down the Greater Christchurch Partnership. It's probably a good idea for Waimakariri, Christchurch City and Selwyn District to communicate, to have cross collaboration at a staff and council level, but it does raise interesting questions as to the intent of legislation when certain powers are vested in a regional council and certain powers have been delegated out. But like I said, nothing technically wrong with that. It's only technical when it goes into certain things. 8.8 Cash handling on the Greater Christchurch Metro network. This is basically saying that when we have our national ticketing solution implemented in Greater Christchurch in the middle of next year, which is going to be awesome. It's going to mean you're going to be able to swipe on and off buses with your FPOS card, your debit card, etc., your phone. There's going to be a particular travel card that is going to be available across multiple jurisdictions, public transport, so you'll be able to go on the buses in Auckland with the same card as Canterbury, etc. This report is basically saying when that comes out, when that's implemented, cash will no longer be available as a payment method on buses. And yeah, that will affect people for sure, because the stats here are 12% of bus users use cash. 8.10, sustainable consents delivery and public transport. So a big spending item here, approval of additional funding of up to $3.5 million from General Rates Reserves for the implementation of the Sustainable Consents Delivery Plan in 2023-2024. We also have a point here to approve additional funding of $600,000 from public transport reserves for the delivery of the current public transport work program. The backlog in consents is a major priority for the organisation. We've drawn attention to it a lot. The farmers, politicians have drawn attention to it a lot. The chief executive has made it the priority of the organisation, and basically this funding will employ an additional 39 people into the organisation to get through the consenting backlog, because it's one of the bread and butters of the organisation is around land and water and air consent. If you want to build a structure on a piece of land and you'd like to dig a little drain alongside the driveway, you need a consent from us. And over time, as regulations have changed, there's a myriad of reasons for this, but a backlog has emerged, and it's slowing down not only development, but it's also slowing down functions within the organisation. So I voted for this. It carried unanimously, both of these decisions. Coming to the end now, 8.11, independent member recruitment. So, we get on our Audit, Finance and Risk Committee, which is kind of the principal committee of Council, chaired by North Canterbury Councillor Grant Edge. The terms of reference requires that there is at least one independent member, and that is a member who is neither a councillor nor a staff member. And that person is supposed to provide an independent oversight of areas of finance, audit and risk. And then finally, we went into public excluded, and I cannot make a comment on anything within that because that would break the standing orders.